6 o'clock. It is Monday, December 19th, 2022, 6 p.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner LaRose, would you be so kind to do roll call?
Sure. Garland,
Present.
Stasinski,
She's excused.
Layton,
She's excused.
Reardon, sorry.
Present.
LaRose, present. Welsh,
Present.
and Andres.
Here.
I think I got everybody.
All right, moving down to item 4, the actual agenda. Review for conflict of interests, and then if there is none, I can take a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, Aaron will not be able to make it tonight. He'll be able to come to a subsequent meeting.
Oh, okay. Should we strike that from the agenda for an in-person update? Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll make the motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 9A.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, public comment. There is no public here with us tonight. Moving down to approval of the minutes, November 21st, 2022. Once you have a chance to look those over, and if there's no changes, we can take a motion to approve and accept the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for Monday, November 21st, as presented.
Support.
Motion by LaRose, second by Garland. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we are down to correspondence. I'm trying to think, we have any. Okay. We'll move down to item 8, reports. The treasurer's report. Our treasurer is absent tonight. Does anybody have any questions regarding the report? And if so, Beth, would you be able to navigate us through?
Sure. I would just draw your attention to the bottom line item. Sarah had mentioned to me that the commission had asked for the detail behind the total on that line item.
That's the one that was over budget last month, right? Okay.
Is that staffing consultant, is that a lease for community gardens?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Statecraft.
Did we shift more money into that line item?
Yes, there was, at the last board meeting, we did budget adjustments across the general fund. I take that back. I believe that we did, but if you'll look down at the bottom, your year-to-date balance is well below your amended budget. So as long as we could shift between those line items, we don't have to do that one
Do a budget
specifically. Yeah, we may have, I just
Why
can't
doesn't it
recall.
move an expense or move budget?
Yeah.
I just have a question. I know we did bring up, and I don't know what time or when it comes into play, to have a line item for the community garden. When that comes into play or not, or
Is that something that we'll be doing at budget time, is adding those items? Okay.
So when you go through your budget, where you want to allocate funds, if there's not a line item for that, we can either change a current line item if it fits, or create a new line item. Right now, the clerk's office is going through a change with the chart of accounts with the state, so all of these line items on the left are changing. I'm not sure where we're at in the process of that, but eventually you'll see all of those change somewhat.
Yeah, again, it just would be nice to have a line item for that, as soon as we can get one.
Well, we'll make it our goal to add that during the budget time, and then we'll be able to earmark whatever funds that we choose to in there. All right, I'll move us down to the subcommittee report, community garden.
Yeah, at our last meeting, it was a group effort of discussion of the garden and the cost that was part of that. So we made a suggestion to have the engineer come back and maybe look at it more in 2 different phases to get that price more conducive. And then Beth was there too, and she also suggested to maybe look at that Sparks grant for maybe the community gardens. And I see in our packet that there was something mentioned about Arbutus, that is pretty much taken care of in the sense of that Sparks. And then the other one was the warming hut. It looked like we did not get that for the warming hut. Beth, you would know more.
Right, so with the Spark grant, I think at your last meeting, you all talked about potentially putting in for money for Arbutus for that. However, when Sarah and I and Carl Ferguson, who's done some grant writing for you and for the township in general, discussed that, we didn't feel that that would be a good opportunity for Arbutus, because that's a project, you guys specifically talked about doing it on phase 1, and that's already been funded through the DNR trust fund. In all likelihood, given the cost that we've seen, that was a 2020 grant application or award. So who knows? It is going to bid probably in January. The specifications have been approved by the DNR trust fund, and those are put together by the township engineer. Once those are approved, then you can go to bid. And so I know a couple of you, I wasn't at the meeting, but you had asked, where are we with that process? They were working on the specifications for it, but those were approved rather. And so right now it sits with Wade Trim. They will take it out to bid, but they will pick the timing based on what they feel that they can get the best review and information from vendors, whether that's January or February timeframe. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of worried about the cost of the project going up significantly, and then
Yeah.
us not being able to do much, without.
So one good thing, I mean, it may go up, that's what everybody has seen across the state, right? Whether they're doing parks or whether they're doing water and sewer projects or any type of infrastructure. We're lucky we can look at a couple different options on how to fund that. Let's hold tight and see where the project comes in at before we worry about things we don't have to worry about.
So in so many words, don't panic yet.
Don't panic yet. And then with respect to, let's see, you just mentioned something else about Spark.
The
that-
warming hut.
Oh, the warming hut was the other one that you guys mentioned, and we were waiting to see if it would get funded. That meeting with the DNR trust fund was last Wednesday. It did not get funded. I wouldn't feel too dejected. I mean, we didn't score particularly high in it. It was like the bottom 20%. But I wouldn't, like I said it when I sent out an email blast to all the boards and commissions about the project not getting funded, it was very competitive because of the limited funds that they released this year. So, there was a lot of projects not funded, and there were many above us that were, most of them were 300,000, which is the high ask mark for the max for the DNR Trust Fund grant. And out of the 23 million that they funded, and that was both acquisition and development, 5 million went to one acquisition project. So I think that, if I remember correctly, that was a parcel in the UP that they had been working on and looking at for, I'm
I feel
not
like I just read
sure.
about this.
Yeah, I can get you the name of the project, but, so, once you take 5 million out of 23, that's with 18 million, and that goes across again, both acquisition and development. It's just a whole lot tighter. They were very positive and very encouraging about putting just about, I hate to say it, but like, almost anything through the Sparks grant, because they have so much more flexibility and funding through that. Even though I still feel like even through a lot of the webinars, it feels a little bit unknown, right? You get used to like going through the DNR Trust Fund and you kind of get it. But the Spark grant is new, and so we'll see how it goes.
It's
Seem-
more flexible than DNR, you're saying?
I believe it to be more flexible, like, so a
They
couple of
don't
things.
outright tell you that, but they kind of like nudge you that, like, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of the things, and Sarah has sat through more of the webinars than I've had the opportunity to, and Carl as well. But for one, there's no match required. So that's different than the DNR Trust Fund. Another one is that typically DNR Trust Fund does not pay for any planning activities. So visioning processes, community engagement, all of that. You can't do that through the DNR Trust Fund, but you can through the Spark grant. Another one is that you can define what recreation is for your community. That may be very different than a traditional DNR Trust Fund type of a grant.
Sparks cutoff is coming up pretty soon. Right?
It's
Today.
It's a
today.
done deal at this point. We're looking at next year at this point.
Well, no, so what we had, because we looked at year 2 that you guys brought up, which was the Arbutus Gap funding, which we didn't think would fit with what they were articulating. And then the warming hut, we waited to see, we weren't funded, so then we just spun all that information that was in a DNR fund into a Spark grant. So it's literally sitting open on my computer right now, waiting to get clicked through. I have till 11:45 tonight to click submit. Sarah was working on it last week and then today even. So, and we had, anticipating that our chances of getting funded were low. On the warming hut, we had the board pass a resolution of support for putting the project in for a Spark grant.
Oh, yeah. Good timing on that, because you're required to have that, right?
Yeah, we figured if we got funded, we would just throw away the resolution, but if we didn't, then we needed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So I think, again, you had suggested maybe bringing it to this board about, upping maybe the community garden for a Sparks grant.
So I think it's a good conversation for you guys to have. There's 2 more rounds of the Spark grants. You'll definitely have more information after this first round to know about the second and third. You're allowed 3 different applications. You can put, a municipality could put 3 in today, or 1 each cycle, or 3 in at the end.
so is it 3 total then? you
Yes.
said? Oh, okay.
Yes, so, just think about what your other 2 might want to be. When I talked with Carl Ferguson, he wondered about the community garden, perhaps particularly being a candidate because of the centralized location. So you're able to get here with the Safe Routes to School infrastructure that'll be going in, and the TART trail coming south. Then you've got trails. Then we've got the bus with the bus stop across the street. You have, obviously, vehicle. So that might be something, and again, how do they define recreation? well, and how does it speak to COVID? So some of the questions are like directly, how does that relate to COVID? So, being outside, learning to grow your own food, how to do those things really do speak to some of those
Yeah.
pandemic things that happen or could happen with future pandemics.
And also with that survey, it's quite clear what the public is wanting or their suggestions. I mean, it's all right there, that information is quite clear with a community garden and what they're looking for too.
I think it would be something good as we find out when the first round gets funded, or maybe even before, for you guys just to kind of put all of your projects out there, like you have in the past. Okay, what's going up for ARPA? It's super easy to have a list of what your projects are. Takes just a few minutes, but then maybe really rank them for Spark grants. So, one that the Holiday Woodlands, the reason it may fit for a Spark grant is because part of that process really needs to be the planning process, right? We talked about the mountain bikers who are maybe in conflict with the hikers. And so that's not just a project that's development of trails, it's also having people come together and create a unified vision of what they want to see on the property. Typically not covered under DNR Trust Fund. Spark could be covered. We are also reaching for other grant opportunities for that too when we see them, so.
Okay. Well, I guess, I know we have a community garden down for business before the Parks Commission as well. So why don't we move down to item 8C? Do you have any updates from staff? I know you kind of just gave us an update.
Yeah, I just, we did pass the 2023 budget in November, and so you'll start to see that in coming months. That'll end up on your, as the records switch over on your treasurer's report. Just talked a lot about the grants, and those are a big thing. We're also have put several applications into the county process, and so we're just watching as that moves forward. It doesn't seem like they are, well, there's no decisions are final. It does not seem like their priority is recreation-type grants through the county. So I wouldn't hold out any hope for those, but that process isn't over until it's over, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Beth. Moving down to item 9A, which is the community garden. Was there a presentation or?
I see Tim is here. He came in. I don't know where he's at.
Oh, I can try and send.
Yeah, I thought, yeah.
Hi, Jen, how are you? I'm just getting to the community garden agenda.
Hello.
And you're welcome to, as they're on this agenda, either stand at the podium or sit at the table, whatever makes you most comfortable. Oh, okay. PowerPoint, yep, we can hook that up. We have every connection here known to man. And then let me just turn this on. The overhead's on right now.
Okay.
And then there's the connections. And we just take whichever one you your computer and then we'll select in here. And then I'm gonna grab you an, did you need an easel too, did you say, or no?
No, I can work off the presentation.
Okay,
Yeah.
you just the links over there. I'm thinking, Tim, we forgot to tell you that this, or I forgot to notice this meeting's a half hour earlier than our normal meetings. Nope. Yep. Nope, that kind of,
Kind of worked out.
yeah. Yep, perfect timing.
Sorry for reading that, needs communication here in a second. See that okay? The dim the lights or?
Well, if we dim,
Punching the lights off, I'm recording this, okay.
so if we turn any more off, they all go off.
Oh, okay.
So I do have the recessed ones over there turned off.
Oh, got it, okay. Good evening, thanks for having me. I'm Tim Knudsen from Becker.
I'm sorry, could you pull that microphone closer, please, sir?
Yes. Better?
Yep, thumbs up.
Okay. I'm Tim Knudsen from Beck and Rader. I'm a landscape architect and principal at our office in Petoskey. We were hired by the township here to prepare conceptual plans for the community garden. The person who developed these plans, with my assistance, isn't here today. She couldn't make it. Her name is Sophia Bonk. She's also a landscape architect. I worked with her to put the plans together. A little bit of history and background. So we put a plan together, many of you are probably aware, a couple of years ago. I think we finished in 2018 or 2019, so maybe more than a few years ago. That was just a community garden. And when I say just, it was an efficient use of the space with a real focus on just establishing planting beds. So some of the other items that we're going to show here associated with this community garden weren't present in that plan. I think that plan may have sat for a little bit, generated some renewed enthusiasm, and then we met this, I believe, late fall to talk about the project scope for the new community garden, what should be in that community garden, in addition to the obviously the garden plots. So this first slide just shows us the garden location, which is the dashed white rectangle on the left-hand side behind this building or west of this building. Now, we'll look at that in a little more detail because we can't actually use that entire site that's shown in the dashed outline for a couple of reasons. One is topography. So if you look at the 4 slides to the right-hand side, you can see that we're fairly flat along the building and close to the building, but as we move west and particularly south, we start to gain a lot of topography. One thing we're looking for, if we can find it, creating community garden is a nice flat level surface so we don't have to move as much earth and incur the impacts of moving earth, trying to reestablish plants and stability and not open ourselves to the impacts of stormwater management. So this pushed us to try to utilize, I think, the property on the northern half of that white dashed rectangle, because the grades are much flatter there as you move south and, as I said, westward too. You start to pick up more topography, and then if we move far enough south, we run into a small retention area. So again, trying to minimize our earthwork impact in this second exercise. So we started off by, excuse me, back in November, we started off by preparing two concepts, the concept on the left hand and the concept on the right hand side shown on the screen. We received mixed input on both, but with regard to concept one, the things that people liked were the maximized gardening space. The entire space is fenced. There is a central gathering space to facilitate educational opportunities, social interaction, things like that. A pergola structure on the southwest corner, so that rectangle on the southwest corner, with the little red circles, those are tables with a pergola above them. People really liked that arrangement in that it presented an area outside of the garden for educational opportunities, so not to interfere with gardening opportunities. Not so much in favor of the location of compost and materials, so there is a red square to the very left-hand side of that concept on the left. That is a potting shed. And then I believe further to the north, on the top left-hand corner, is where the compost and materials were located. So you can see there are some inefficiencies created there by putting those compost and materials so far away from the park entrance and not in close proximity to the potting shed. The concept two feedback we received was that people preferred the general form of this feedback, not laid out on a grid, not as geometric. That curved form can work with the existing topography. So again, trying to create a plan that works with the grades that we have already. There's more softscape in this version and more areas for education and community events. The fence does divide the space, so we were proposing a fence to basically enclose this area here, okay? So this is all gardening space and beds. These are actually accessible beds that you can roll up to in a wheelchair and get yourself underneath and do some gardening. But this is all educational, social space, and we thought it would be best to separate those two spaces with fence. Also keeps the fence north enough so that it doesn't impact the view shed of folks inside the building. So we came back with a plan that favored the forms concept two, and tried to include some of the elements of concept one, such as a central gathering space for educational opportunities, trying to maximize planter space, but hold on to some of the other things that folks liked in concept one. This is the plan that we came back with earlier this month, on the 7th. Our design goals were to maximize the garden plots for all levels of accessibility, so we want to make sure we provide opportunities for people, no matter what physical abilities they have, to garden. That's really the true spirit of universal accessibility, to create some equity. I wanted to provide seating and shaded areas for gardening on hot summer days, especially for young and older gardeners. And again, to try to follow the existing topography to the degree that we can to reduce costs and minimize earth movement, soil compaction, and less, I guess, contending with soil erosion. So, I'm going to describe some of the elements to this plan before we move on to the final plan. So, starting at the very north end here, we were showing a a large pavilion shelter. This would again be used for community events, instructional events. This square here is a set of solar panels that would just power the lights inside the roof of the pavilion. And this building right here would be the potting shed. There's a red L that forms this shape. That would be an enlarged potting bench. This is all paved event plaza, and then we had a community table here for dining, again, for educational, instructional events. And then this whole side of the plan was bordered with pollinator gardens. This could also be a rain garden or bioswale. Again, something to add I guess a sense of enclosure to the garden, and also a nice backdrop to this side of the garden. In between that potting shed and this stretch of pollinator garden would be our composting, mulch, and potting soil bin. So all those elements are located close to one another. You would get access to that area for service by either the vehicle needed to make a drop off by making its way around the backside here, or on the hard pavements by making this route here, okay? These are all planting beds. They're color-coded to indicate different levels of height, so we have some lower down so folks can garden on their knees if they want to, some at seat wall level. So you're just gardening like this. And then some planters, these two here in particular, that are a little higher, that are hollow underneath, that you can roll a wheelchair underneath. We had a small educational gathering space in the center, a place for people to get away from their garden plot and socialize for a few minutes if they like. A pair of benches here. And then once we get outside the fence, this larger educational space with a set of tables and pergola. But these are just some shade trees to provide some comfort and shade and refuge from the summer heat. Making our way to the east here, we're proposing a sidewalk that just extends from the existing walk, but also that makes its way in this direction back to the library. And this walk would also host the story walk component that the folks at the library have been talking about. So keep in mind, this was our last plan. Seems probably pretty ambitious. The price tag that came in matched that ambition, and so our charge for this meeting was to come back with a scaled down version that allows us to phase in some of the things that you see on this plan that are driving up cost, but also allows us to get just a community garden and maybe a few of these elements in the ground in a first phase, okay? So I want to say our estimate for this plan with all elements, including design, construction contingencies, and a factor for inflation was around, I believe it was around $800,000. So we were asked to try to cut that in half if we could, and bring the budget down to a much more affordable plan.
But with the intent of possibly still being able to work our way back to the original.
Exactly. We didn't want to box ourselves out of
Right.
implementing something that ultimately looks like that. Right? So we did a couple things in addition to revising the concept to bring costs down. One was to eliminate a fair amount of concrete sidewalk. We're trying to keep the space as natural feeling as we can. We know that concrete facilitates accessibility, but we can use a crushed gravel, especially if we use a geotextile underneath, that will also provide accessibility, allow the water to drain through the profile rather than run off the sidewalk, provide accessibility and save us some money in the bargain. So in this first plan, all of the really bright gray, whitish line work that you see here, that's all concrete sidewalk, okay? We felt we could bring the budget down a lot by trying to replace a lot of that which is with gravel, which is what exists or what is proposed between the planting beds. Another thing we did to try to reduce costs, so we had a couple different materials we were proposing for planters and had arrived on the solution of, landscape timbers or wood with boulders in between to try to create, I guess, build with natural materials. One of the concerns with landscape timbers is that it's really hard to find a landscape timber that isn't treated, and we get concerned about what that womanizing or the treatment that they're using now does to the soils over a period of time. But we're also finding that timbers and boulder construction can be really expensive, so we're proposing we switch to precast concrete block planters. For these planters, you can get those blocks in different heights and basically build the beds to the height that you want to achieve. The block will be much longer lasting than landscape timbers, treated or untreated, and we don't have to worry about imparting something to the soil. So I think we save around $20 a square face foot with switching from, from landscape timber and boulder construction for the planters to block planters.
Is that what you would call hemlock wood? Or not?
No, we looked into that, and if we were to purchase hemlock for our landscape timbers, we're gonna double the cost.
Okay.
And they can be really hard to get a hold of. Sometimes you have to go to a mill to get the right size beam that you want to get. So how did we get to the plan that we have today? So this is the final concept plan that we're bringing to you today. And so you can see that this plan is basically a version of the previous plan, but cut into half or two phases. I think I explained in the previous plan how this north half really facilitates itself better to gardening because it's much more flat than this area as we get further south. And then we also know that we don't want to bring this garden or the elements too much further south and impair the views of the building and folks who use it to the woodlot beyond. So what we're proposing here is that the first phase would include this portion of garden, everything above this dashed black line, so that would include gravel, accessible paths and route between the planters, planters of various heights. We're proposing an accessible planter here that you could roll a chair underneath and still garden, and then some benches here to help form a small social or probably more educational space that centers off of this garden and gives particularly the folks who are using this table a pretty nice view. The other thing we did, so you can see now there is only one concrete path that takes us to this space. No longer a concrete path here. While this north section of the plan is showing the pavilion and the solar lighting, that would be a phase 2 item. So we would propose that this pad just gets built in phase 1, and 3 or 4 tables are purchased with umbrella holders and umbrellas, and so folks could use that as an educational space, stay shaded and comfortable, with the intent of eventually phasing in that pavilion in a phase 2. Okay. This walk would still be included in phase 1. And then our pollinator garden would still range along the west edge of the garden, but we've skinnied up the dimension here a little bit to save money. And then we've also extended what we would call a stormwater garden along this edge. So this is an area where we could send stormwater either above grade by manipulating the topography, or below grade with drainage pipes and outlets to get it to this area. And then we're proposing a bioswale rain garden arrangement planted with native plants. So this second phase would include the additional planters, including a couple additional table planters that you can roll a wheelchair underneath. This large event instructional space with a curved pergola on it and a series of tables without umbrellas. Proposing some smaller shade trees here. These could be maybe idealized versions. We talked about this in our last meeting of fruit trees. We know the legacy of the area when it comes to fruit production, but we don't want to propose straight fruit trees for this area because we know how much maintenance they can demand. So when we talk about putting fruiting trees in this area, we're talking more about things like Chanticleer pear, for example, that it's not a pear that you're going to eat. The fruit is about this big and pretty innocuous, but it gets a nice flower that resembles pear trees, and we can do the same thing with cherry and crabapple. This large green area in the center here would be an enlargement of this bioswale. So when this portion is built, this would be the only rework required to pull that material out. Frankly, that material could be potted and saved and then replanted in this larger, I guess, more meaningful rain garden and bioswale. So, any questions so far? So, for fencing, we're proposing a couple different fence materials. We've got a standard farm fence where we want to maintain visibility. So if we're separating these two spaces with fence that may run, if both faces are built, that may run like that, we want to make sure we maintain visibility between the two spaces, because if somebody is outside the garden and their children are inside the garden or vice versa, they'd be much more comfortable with that line of sight. However, for the perimeter, particularly this east edge, we're proposing a more solid garden fence. A garden fence that could serve as a trellis in many areas, so we can get material to climb up that fence edge here and even here, which will add a sense of enclosure, allow people to garden standing up, but also provide a screen and a buffer from the utility lines here and some of the visual clutter to our east, such as the parking lots here. A number of benches throughout, which are these dark red squares, couple benches in our phase one. These would all be backed with arms, so we want to make sure we're facilitating accessibility. And also for grant scoring, we would want to specify something that's made out of recycled materials if we could. A further look at materials, so the slide on the left is a deer-proof fence. This was an idea that was shown to us by Susan LaRose that was in Susan, I can't remember her last name.
Sue Newman's
Nelson.
garden, yeah. Something similar to that. Hers was more finished, I guess you could say.
The notion with this fence is
That
that
looks kind of rickety.
you don't particularly have to provide fabric for the whole height of the fence.
Right.
You just have to provide it for that first 5 feet. Deer are going to see this upper beam and not understand that there's a clear space between that beam and not try to sneak in between. That's going to discourage them without having to spend the money to cover that whole plane.
So it's more open, because she took it to 6 feet, the standard, and then did another 2 feet, just framed it in, and that saved the deer from wanting to
Yes.
wander in. Plus, too, we mentioned along that west side that we could still have garden beds underneath those spots, too, where there could be plantings along that whole wall there on the base. Yeah, all through there. Instead of it's just a straight fence, we could utilize that bottom half of that space with actual gardening
Yes.
and prevent deer from coming in.
Yeah, and prevent deer and save some cost in not stretching fabric to the full height of the fence. The next image is what I was describing when I talk about trellis fence, something that still allows views, but maybe not so much, but has maybe a more finished appearance that we would want to present on this side of the garden that faces the building. This is a garden shed style that we determined was most appropriate. We're not specifying this building, but just the style for it and a placeholder budget item for that building. This is an example of reinforced gravel, so there's a geotextile underneath that can be anywhere from 1 inch to 3 or more inches thick. And this method can be used to bridge bogs, wetlands, and actually get construction equipment off of those. So we know it'll give us some stability for reinforced gravel. With the geotextile underneath, the gravel doesn't get displaced as much, and so it maintains that accessibility a little better than just straight gravel. There is an a la carte advanced treatment to this, and that's to apply a spray-on epoxy, which would lock the stones together, but still allow drainage to permeate through. When we get into applying that epoxy, we're starting to approach the cost of sidewalk, so we're
Yeah.
thinking probably just loose gravel or loose gravel with geotextile.
Yeah, all along Kids Creek, right there by the hospital and the cancer center. Again, I took a sample of what is down there, and that's all wheelchair accessible, and it's compact and it's crushed, so even if you walk on it, it doesn't move, so we could always use something like that as soon as we can find out what that item is.
Yeah, oftentimes you see crushed limestone, so this probably isn't the best example of a photo because the particles that we're going to use for the surface would be much finer. So you're thinking of something that may have the appearance of consistency of cat litter, that size particles. Crushed limestone is probably the most common material. People will use crushed concrete, but we like to stay away from specifying that because that can break down further and back into cement fines, which is not really what we want. We want something that'll not break down, that'll lock together.
And we-
Although that crushed concrete, that's what they use before they pave a driveway, and that ends up being like a paved
Yeah,
surface.
yeah, there are good,
Although I
there are
don't
good
know
uses for it.
the health benefit of that being alongside, but, yeah, I've seen it, and it's great stuff.
This image on the bottom left is an example of a story walk sign. Again, an idea that the library had to pull the two sites together to use this as an educational opportunity. And this would start from the walk that starts at the library and continue not just along that walk, but into this space, and eventually, if this gets built, along this loop. Okay. An example of a block compost bin. This is a pretty refined sketch. Those of you who have been to landscape depots have probably seen these more in a utilitarian fashion where the blocks are really large so they can push material up against them and the material doesn't displace. We can make that out of large or small block. Probably want to keep it fairly small for this space so that we don't occupy a lot of space with just block square footage. This is one example of block raised planters. Now, this example just shows a traditional cinder block, which is fine. You can plant within those cells. Another option is to use cinder block with a cap, and that would allow people some flat surface without the cells to sit on and garden from. One thing that was pointed out in Susan Nelson's video is that no matter what we use, we're presenting a pretty hard surface, so She mentioned the idea of providing something soft to sit on, be it pillows or something else that you could, or mats that you could possibly grab from the library and bring those out to garden with you. Lastly, just an image of a potting bench with storage below, which is what we would propose for this plan. We're not necessarily proposing this overhead shade, but that potting bench would be this element here. So this is a cross section that we cut through I guess through that plane. So it's a section elevation that we're taking a slice through the site, turning it on its edge and looking at it from ground view and looking from here to the north. So we're seeing the elements that are on that cut line and the elements that are behind. So what we're seeing looking from the south to north is on the left-hand side, that garden shed. I believe these are, on the other side of that garden shed are storage bins. And then this plant mass would be the pollinator plants. This is the long potting bench that we talked about, but with storage underneath. This would be a ground level planter. This is an example of a table planter or a wheelchair level planter with which you can get a chair underneath and still have depths of 6 to 12 to even 18 inches to garden in. And then next to the right would be a standing level planter and then sitting level planter. And then this form in the background just suggests the form of that second phase shelter. Again, nothing elaborate or necessarily statement making, just a nice clean form, excuse me, that harmonizes well with the site. The roof edges here and here, we're showing rain chains with a set of rain barrels that can be moved around and emptied throughout the site and brought back to this shelter to gather more rain runoff. Excuse me. So this is an elevation of a standing planter arrangement with the trellis behind it. If this trellis is against the planter, then, as Susan mentioned, that trellis or that fence backing can be used to also grow plants that'll, climb on that fence. It's an example of an accessible planter, so you can see this gentleman is in a wheelchair. He's got just enough clearance to get his arms above that planter and do some work, but the clearance underneath that table to get his chair underneath it so that he can get as close as he needs to the garden and do some gardening.
So that planter that was just in that picture, I mean, that's not what we're looking for, or is it similar to that?
This picture here.
Because that's wood, correct?
Yeah, so similar, and these planters would be made out of wood. Everything else would probably want to use block, but to be able to get that area that you can roll underneath, we would want to use a wood platform for this. So going back to phase one, we've got a total garden plot area of 860 square feet, approximately 31 plots. And our preliminary estimate was just about half, so we were at $294,294.96. Say $294,500 would be close. And this includes all of the elements in this phase one. So you notice the pavilion is not there in the location, but the potting bench is, as well as this large paved area and our pollinator garden around the back side of it to give us some enclosure so that you don't feel like you're just out in the open in the elements and have no buffering from the highway to the north and the parking area and guidelines. Phase 2 of the garden adds 860 square feet of plat area, so we're almost doubling what we have. In the first phase, we have about 31 plots, and our preliminary estimate is $264,253.41. A lot of that cost is associated with the pavilion, the solar panels associated with the pavilion, the lighting underneath the pavilion, and then some additional costs associated with this curved pergola here. I think we had that pergola alone priced at about $35,000. So some additional materials here. This shows the open shelter concept. This is an indication of the curved pergola that I mentioned. In the budget are also bollard lights. So this is an example of a solar timber bollard light. Whatever we place on the site, we would want to be solar. And just something to provide enough light for people so they can utilize the space when they're there and it's getting darker. We're not trying to light it throughout the night to a certain IES standard. A notion of a rain garden here, which we would develop, as I mentioned, on the south portion of the site in phase 2 here. An idea of the seat wall, and that comes into the budget in phase 2 in this area here. So this would all be seat wall. Lets us build some enclosure for that space, give people a common place to sit, and also serve as a backing for this rain garden here. And then very last, on the lower right is an entry arbor. This is an extravagance, but we were proposing this in the second phase right here at the garden entry to frame the entrance, give the garden a sense of arrival. So just kind of wrapping up with some garden outcomes and activities. We know that people relax and de-stress when they're gardening, spending time outdoors, which is beneficial to us all, and we're all realizing is more important than we thought it was before the pandemic. Eating healthier by growing and eating your own locally grown food, experiencing improved health through physical exercise, being out in the sun, socializing and making new friends, educational opportunities, economic opportunities to perhaps save some money by growing and eating your own food, and then involving kids and family in educational experiences. So we were just highlighting some of the
Yeah, what is it? It's so small, I can't read
we were just highlighting some of the survey outcomes.
it.
So these were all answers that folks provided in the survey that went out last spring. So garden activities were, obviously the top was learning how to grow vegetables, fruits, and herbs, but then we get into next learning how to compost, a seed library exchange, creative workshops, and cooking classes. So you can see in these first 5 answers, people are already starting to think about things other than managing a garden plot, right? And then we can get into the next most popular 5 answers. Primary school children's gardening / education club, exercise classes, gardening to stay fit or yoga, preschool children's gardening or gardening education club for kids that are 2 to 4 years old, secondary school children's gardening and education club for kids on the older end, 13 to 16 years, and then almost 9% of respondents also offered an other. I'm not sure what was specified for that answer. So again, the point here is that a garden can be more than a community garden if you want it to, and the survey answers that we got from the survey indicate that.
All right, thank you.
Last slide here, just wanted to mention funding opportunities. We know the Spark grant just came out. I heard some talk about that before when I was sitting out in the lobby. There are 2 additional rounds coming up shortly, reaching out to stakeholders, constituents. So any watershed council that you may have here, I don't think Tip of the Mid is yours, but to the Watershed Council, Master Garden Association, Farm to School, Northwest Michigan Disability Network, Sustainability at North Central, a number of educational facilities that may be interested in helping either with sweat equity or money. There are some ideas related to funding efforts like sponsoring a brick, block, or bench. And then just interacting with other people and getting them interested in this opportunity and what this could bring to the township. Here are some additional grants that we'll wrap up with that sustain good environmental practices. There's one called Bee Cause Project that provides funding for pollinator gardens. American Public Garden Association has some programs, as well as Seed Your Future, Michigan Alliance for Environmental and Outdoor Education. The Wildflower Association of Michigan likewise has grants that go towards pollinating programs. And lastly, the 4-H committee grants. So just wanted to wrap up with an idea of some funding opportunities. Those aren't all of them, but those are the ones that came first to mind with this project.
I have
Thank
a
you.
couple things for you. Is that a PowerPoint you would be willing to share with the Parks Commission?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. My other question too was with the concrete. Do you have a cost estimate on the concrete itself that's in phase one?
I do, but I don't have a line item estimate with me.
Okay, so if you were to remove the sidewalk, say, for example, comes from the entrance to the north, like what would,
Like this piece?
yeah, have the pad for the pavilion and the picnic tables, but with the amount of concrete in that sidewalk, just curious if we incorporated that potentially phase two when we do that transition. Because it sounds like that crushed limestone it withstands quite heavy loads, so it probably withstands heavier loads than a couple inches of concrete for a sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, you would save maybe just ballparking $4,000 or $5,000 by converting that from concrete to gravel. And you may find that it works and there's no point in building that back into the second phase.
Sure.
What's the price of the permeable pavers compared to concrete?
Permeable pavers will be close to double.
15 versus 18.
Yeah, permeable pavers will be close to,
The only thing with concrete is the runoff,
yeah.
which creates, and, I would prefer to stay away from concrete, period, because of the runoff. I mean, we're trying to do as little movement of land because it compacts the soil, so we're trying to preserve that soil, and then we're adding concrete, which causes the rain and the water and all that. So maybe that could be something more research done on that. Again, someday when the pavilion is able to go in, obviously you need a good foundation. But leading up to that, if there's some other things out there some new product that people are using?
This whole area could be permeable pavers if we wanted to. It's just gonna result in a cost increase, but
And I see, I mean, if we already made, have to do this in phases, take that first phase, and yeah, it's going to bite a little bit to do permeable pavers, but in the long run, it's where we need to be anyways, so why put a Band-Aid right from the get-go? Either do it or don't. On something like that, to have to redo all that.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to place concrete here, you wouldn't want to replace it. You want to make that decision
Well, I won't,
early on, but
I'm just talking get rid of concrete in general and use the crushed limestone throughout the whole thing, and, I mean, that's a lot of concrete, and,
yeah, and really-
$5 potentially savings for, I mean, I don't know what the cost of concrete's going, but I feel like it would be more savings, and then especially if we didn't do it under the pavilion for phase 2. I mean, now that's probably double the concrete just on the sidewalk, so if we were to do crushed limestone throughout the whole thing on phase 1, we can always add in
right.
concrete or
Pavers.
pavers after the fact,
Right.
but for cost savings for phase 1 to get this project started, I mean, crushed limestone, you can set picnic tables on top of it. I mean, it's gonna withstand, I mean, you can bring in a dump truck back there and it's not gonna crush.
Well, we want to make sure that, wheelchair people can get
Well,
back there too.
but it
you know.
is ADA accessible.
The other thing too is we just mentioned, but we'll have our another meeting here next month, is doing, and I have yet, that's my action plan, to call about donating pavers. You pay for a paver. That might help with some of the costs there too. So I need to call Pat Parker and see how they did it.
I mean, there's a cost associated with all this concrete.
I mean, what do you think,
Just out of curiosity, is there a reason why the event plaza was chosen in that particular spot?
Yes.
Yeah, a couple reasons. So one was to make sure that we're throwing shade away from the garden.
Yeah.
Another was to get something in between all the visual and audio clutter to the north in the garden
And the noise and the north winds.
and the north winds as
North
well.
winds.
Yeah, so, and then you can see we're backing that shelter with
Right.
some plantings, so we're really trying to make this view go away.
And then, I keep on thinking to myself, like, for the price tag that goes along with this, is this what the people surveyed and the East Bay residents, is this kind of what they were expecting to come out of this, because it is a pretty big project, and I would love to see like a fundraiser where you can advertise and get more people engaged with it, because right now it just kind of concerns me, how big of a project this has turned into. And I don't know, like some things like the boardwalk to the library, I mean, maybe that doesn't have to go in right away. And, I don't know how much that would help with the cost, but, because we could partner with the library and they could help raise money to do that, because it's kind of a program that they're looking to push. But, obviously if we're all in favor of it, we could probably do that too. But I just wanted to kind of, I don't know, I have mixed feelings on it, but I like the designs and I definitely see that the work that was put into it, but, I'm just wondering if we're biting off more than we can chew right now with this. Now, mind you, if we went for a grant, we got a grant, that put a lot of momentum behind it, but right now, I mean, we're starting off with nothing right now. So I think, a good starting point might be like a fundraising campaign, like through Patron a City or something where you can get a grant to match, and that will give you all kinds of metrics on, who's really getting behind and supporting this, and then you can kind of build off of that. And those, you could turn those kind of campaigns around pretty quick. I think they usually do it in like 30 to 60 days. But, and that would give us, a kind of a better idea on, how big to go and, how much, support is truly behind this and, how many people are going to get involved. I like the education aspects of it for sure, but, that might be a second Because, I mean, we had to get people to commit to those programs. Yeah, right now, before everything's built is one thing, and, you know, it's good ideas and conversations, and yes, it is happening. You got the Conservation District, you know, doing farming and stuff now, and, you know, so I think the interest is growing, but, you know, I feel like a little more certainty on the community support would make me feel better.
I think you need to reread the survey.
I-
And a lot of that
I-
would probably help you understand.
So
And-
do you think going to any resident in East Bay right now with that price tag, do you think they'd be in support of it right off the bat? Or, I mean, I have read the
Of course
survey.
not. Would you think anyone would with the warming hut?
Well, I
So,
mean, people
you
are
know-
meeting, it is a designated sledding hill.
But, you know.
In a park.
The Parks Commission needs to either back this or what.
Well-
And it is scaled down. The one main thing that people were looking for was a place to gather, educational. And yes, not just for kids educational, but senior
I know.
citizens or crafts going on or making things from a garden or, I mean.
I think you're getting,
Sky's the limit for those, you know, people that want to be able to use it. And the other intent was to have that pavilion as a source of income for renting. But obviously, that's going to be pushed back into phase 2. So that won't be part of it, you know, of the initial phase. So, yeah, it was, it's probably not a garden that you will see too often because it's incorporating several elements, not just let's go and plop down some soil in a square box and take a hose and water it. It's way beyond that site, way beyond that kind of presentation of what would be nice, especially here at the township property.
I was going to suggest, and I'm just pitching this out there, but maybe a phase 1A that's scaled down from phase 1. So what would that look like? Why don't we just say no concrete pavement? So this walk would go away, and this walk would be in the phase 1B or phase 2. Perhaps we need to think about phasing this space in as a phase 2, and relying on this space down here for our phase 1A educational social space. There's a lot of money wrapped up in this arrangement here, the plantings, this concrete pad.
that's kind
We
of,
want to do an abbreviated potting bench, but certainly nothing that full length. To try to pull some of that cost out, A, and then make it more justifiable because it's really primarily focusing on garden plots with a, you know, with a nod to some educational space here. Then if the interest grows and support grows, you should have the resources to.
well, I think the interest will grow, but, you know, I don't know how quick, but, you know, that's why I was asking about that little pavilion space, you know, how it was decided, and you guys, you know, sound like it was really justified, so, I mean, I get that, just, you know, I'm trying to think,
I think we're trying to figure out how we can still get that without, you know, $400,000. That's why I was asking how much concrete, you know. I mean, if you were to eliminate all the concrete within that area, like, is that, you're looking at $20,000, $30,000 there for all that concrete?
If we include the walk that goes to the library, it might be closer to 10,000, maybe a little bit more.
You know, and that's why I keep the same concept, eliminate the concrete, do crushed limestone throughout the whole thing. And, I mean, if the crushed limestone, if that is ADA accessible, it's used for walkways, paths, there's no reason why we couldn't do that to and behind the library and still get the same thing. We could always upgrade that surface to more of a hardscaped surface in the future. That was my idea behind that. I mean, concrete, that's probably one of the, and it's not the most expensive thing to the project, but
That's certainly adding some
any
cost.
hardscape surface is gonna be the most expensive part of this right now and phase one.
And it's not ultimately necessary to garden, so the, the raised planters, yeah, the block is expensive, we're estimating around 70 a face foot, so, but that's a gardening element, you're creating a bed, but that sidewalk is, I mean, you could say that it's an extravagance if there's a material that we can use that provides accessibility at a more efficient cost.
I mean, I don't want you guys to think that I'm against this, no, because I really do like it. I'm just concerned about, not getting enough money from grants, and then, if we don't have, we're going to be like probably leaning on a lot of fundraising support too, which, can be beneficial too, because you get to market it and get people excited about it. And, but, I feel like just with this particular project, I think that fundraising part of it needs to, be the starting point just to get the people going and motivated on it. And then once we can build that momentum, we could really, prove and show that we got the support and get those grants, and, build it to where we want it to be. But, I feel like we just need a reasonable starting point so we can, get it off the ground and get moving. Because, the last thing we want to do is have a plan that sits on a shelf and then something like COVID happens and everything goes up by 20%. But,
What's the price tag you're comfortable with?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What's the price tag you're comfortable with? Like, when you got this, what was the number you're hoping to see? Why don't we give them that number? See what they based on that. You already cut it in half, and props to you for that. Like, you've done a lot of work on this, so I hate to ask you to scale it down even more, but.
Well, it's one
I also don't-
person's.
Yeah.
I don't want to scale it down more than what the same tower is still.
Well, maybe we should focus on more like the focus areas, like the garden beds is going to be kind of the pushing point on this. So like maybe we focus on getting that part set up, like you mentioned earlier. Sorry, Tim, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you were mentioning like maybe, kind of pumping the brakes on the event plaza area or relocating it to where that gravel is, because when it does come into that next phase and we do build it up in that designated area where you guys have, I mean, it should be fairly easy to move from that gravel area to there, correct? Like, we're talking picnic tables and stuff, right? Just a few things,
Yeah,
or?
I would still keep the ultimate location here.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
The elements that
Because
go there in
eventually
the second
that,
phase could sit here in the first phase, yeah, and just move and just be relocated up there when that's built.
because eventually the educational space will move up sort of close to that space in phase two.
In phase two, yeah, so as that's built, let me get back to the slide here. As this is built, if it's built, then this area could conceivably be filled in with additional planting beds and gain some planting space. But that's kind of how I look at it too. And when we looked at the estimate in the office, we had the same reaction. That's a lot of money for a community garden. We started pricing some of the things that don't relate, well, that aren't specifically related to gardening. And that's where the costs are coming in. So then I start thinking about whittling this down to get it back to a much nicer version of the grid layout that we prepared before. And then we're just, I mean, we're really down to these elements here. I'd hate to propose a community garden without a garden shed or
Yeah,
Wheels bins.
yeah, we'll need something for sure, but,
The sidewalk could go away, gravel surface could be relied on for this, and just building what people need to garden, just getting the planters in place. Sure, you could extend the gravel surfacing to create an educational space here without a lot of expense, but maybe some of these other elements get held back until you can tell that there's enough will to build this out.
well, I think a few things need to come of this meeting regarding this. To show our support and, that we're serious, we're going to want to earmark money. And, we currently have 50,000, I think, earmarked.
Could I
So-
go over, would you like me to go over this sheet?
Sure.
Okay. So there is a fund balance sheet in front of you. As I mentioned to Ryan, just immediately prior to the meeting, this is a work in progress on the township board's part. They've only seen this one time. So we need to rebalance our fund balance amounts. So you do see the line items, which I mentioned to you, will be changing, but they have the current balance there. You'll remember, just over a year ago, I think it was the summer of 2021, this Parks Commission went through and kind of reallocated where they would want to see their fund balance. And so you are the only Board or Commission who's done that so far. So where it says Board or Commission, those are your suggestions. They have not been gone to the board and been approved yet, so those are still sitting as recommendations from the Parks Commission. And you can see what the proposed balance is off to the right. Now, there's some others in here, obviously, that you guys aren't interested in: grounds, vehicles, elections, streetlight capital, roads, those types of things. But you can pick out the ones there pretty easily from that Board or Commission column that have to do with the Parks Commission. Rough numbers, current balance, you have a roughly 280,000 in fund balance. And with your recommendations in that Board or Commission column, you have considerably more, but let me break that down into two pieces. You have 280,000, so really you've just re-stratified your funds. But you do have the addition of about 300,000, and that is that adding of the Arbutus number 5. So yes, you do increase the ask that you are asking from the Township Board, but the ask is based on that grant awarded Arbutus and the project there. Other than that, you, like I said, just redistributed the 280,000. And this is what we will be doing across all of these line items for the board as we do our capital improvement plan in the first half of 2023.
Just to be sure, has there been any other talk of anything else back here? Like they're giving us the clear to make plans?
In the
Back
back here, I'm trying to remember the discussion. If we had a discussion with the board, it's been quite some time ago. It probably was when we first engaged with Beckett and Rader, when it was a Michigan Association of Planning Technical Assistance Grant. So it was probably way back then. The only thing is, this had some resurgence and interest in the past, year, 2 years, that I requested was just be careful of where you're at in case we ever need any additional property for expansion or anything like that. And yes, there has been a department that's asked to potentially do an addition towards the back, and whether that comes to fruition or not, I don't know, but it would probably be wise to just, and I think Beckett and Rader has been really cognizant of the spatial requirements back there.
Okay. I just don't want to come up with a plan and then find out that the Board of Trustees was like, actually, we had other plans.
I guess I can't definitively answer that, but I think I know, you guys have been working on this for a while, and obviously that has.
And if
Hopefully they would have said something a while ago.
Well, if we ever go for like that Spark grant, let's say, we're going to have to get a resolution from the Board of Trustees. So it's going to be important that we don't scare them with what we present to them, and make sure it's reasonable, because otherwise we might not get that resolution.
Right.
And then another aspect to think is, the more I think about this, there's a lot of opportunity for like different sponsorship opportunities and stuff because you could put, do like naming, rights or something on a garden bed area and, designate it, and people might contribute to that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here, but we just have to get the right strategy to get it funded, and, try to be mindful of making sure we're not setting it up to be put on a shelf. Like, and we got the master planning coming on, this year, so, we'll be busy with that. But that's also another opportunity to engage the community and get them hyped up. So, it could really work out in our favor if we do this right. I just, that's my main thing, is just making sure we find that right strategy, and,
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, just another couple comments. This is the Parks Commission's decision, but just a couple of the things when you were going over stuff, just want to mention. One, today, by coincidence, I had planning and zoning looking at the number of housing units that have been approved or are under construction. And when I say housing unit, that we go by like, one REU, residential equivalent unit, right? So an apartment is one, a single-family home is one, a duplex would be two. We have nearly 800 that are approved, and at some point of the process none of those are yet being lived in, and the majority of them are multifamily dwellings, not single-family homes, and they are along this corridor here. So, the reason I mentioned that to you is I did have a phone call from a lady who lives, not in one of, this corridor, but lives in a townhome elsewhere, and was looking for information on the community garden, and filled her in. And
Well,
she
that's a
was
good sign.
she was a really good example of, she was interested in gardening, and even though they have property around the townhouses there, they're not able to use them for gardening, and they just have their townhouse, and she was interested in gardening. So I don't know if that you could draw your own conclusions with, the majority of 800 units being multifamily dwelling units that probably likely will not have the opportunity to garden. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you was with the Spark grant, I guess I can say at the subcommittee meetings, I've been very conservative with Susan and the rest of the subcommittee as to how much you can bite off and accomplish. However, I will note with the Spark grants, they're, considering this is the first round, right, we're all kind of guessing. But I will tell you, it's a minimum of $100,000 grant, minimum, up to, is it 5 million?
Million.
Is it 1 million? 1 million, well, yeah. So 100,000 to 1 million with no match. So, you can look at that and say, let's go down with the, I think Tim was saying like the Phase 1A and try and get that in. You could say, well, we have nothing to lose, let's go with the Phase 1, put it in, and then if you don't get it, come back and do the Phase 1A. The issue is you will have to have support. Obviously, the Parks Commission and the Township Board will need to support that to go in for a Spark grant. So that's just, and I'm not pushing or pulling that, I'm just,
Yeah.
relaying that. And then when you talk about, when fundraising was mentioned, I think even more so, and than the pavers, which have been successful in other nonprofits and groups. I mean, you have the perfect thing with, it may be a little more expensive, but with actual planting beds, donate a planting bed, which there's only so many of those. I mean, it's a whole lot less than getting smaller, and benches.
Local organizations might be more likely to,
And
take on
benches.
something like that.
But the one thing I do want to caution you about is that type of effort takes either
An administrator
time
to
or money.
do it.
Okay, and so we're not really set up staffing-wise to be able to monitor, engage that, and push that. So it's going to end up meaning there either needs to be volunteer hours in coordinating that and being on top of it, or there needs to be funds to hire someone to do that. We are set up staffing-wise to do, as you know, as we have, some larger overall grants. The Spark grants, the DNR Trust Fund, that type of thing.
Sure.
Thank you.
So you were saying we can either go small or go big with the Sparks.
If you're going to go big and go ambitious, then, which is, might be my recommendation,
Go for all.
yeah, then it
Yeah.
would be a matter of selling the project.
But we
So
don't want
not
to
just
lose
calling
that
it a
up.
community garden, but giving it a description that includes the other, like an educational space.
And that word, community garden, I mean, that's so, as a certain, when you image,
Oh, sure.
we need to name it more than what the first original concept is. It's
I mean, I think.
it's a gathering place, it's a
It's almost like
garden.
East Bay Township Plaza.
I don't
and
know,
gardening.
plaza, I think of.
Well, I-
mall, But
Okay.
just a gathering place.
Gather- it's something.
You know, I envisioned a 25-foot gathering table where you would have the community during harvest season. I mean, things like that. Educational, again, not only adults, but kids. And just it have so much variety. And then be able to rent out that pavilion as a nice space. And my phase two of the very expensive thing would be adding a fireplace, a gas fireplace into that pavilion. So again, it's not, the community garden, when you think of that, it's not just a community garden. If someone has a better word for it, I'm
You
open.
just have to sell that on the application, and if Sarah's writing the application, you're all set. She'll do a good job at that.
She does a good job. I'm reading her application right now, so she does do a nice
Is
job.
she good?
She does do a very nice job.
And then it'll, also be a matter of getting support from the stakeholders that chimed in on the survey and getting them to step up and write letters of support when you ask them to for purposes of the grant. Sometimes people are all too willing to offer ideas for improvement until they're asked to back them. So that'd be another,
I remember, we had pretty good numbers then.
just some miscellaneous numbers from the estimate to help. Again, excuse me, when we see community garden and look at the line item number, we were surprised also until we start to think about some of the other elements that are baked into the plan, but also there are almost $100,000 in contingencies of that 400,000. So there is a design and engineering contingency, which will pay the landscape architect and engineers to final design and engineer and put together bid documents. There's a contingency for general contractors, so that covers their cost managing their subs, their overhead and profit. And then there's a construction contingency of 10% to factor in any unknowns that we may come across. Say we're excavating, we find a pocket of clay that just isn't suitable for the space, things like that. The construction contingency is meant to cover. Finally, we have, I believe we have an inflation factor too for 1 year of inflation at 15%. So all this to say, if you were to build this yourselves today, the estimate comes in at around 300,000, not 400,000.
I will let you know, though, we've had a very similar experience with the warming hut. So the architect who designed the warming hut gave us an estimate the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, when we put that in for the grant. We're getting that prepared for the DNR Trust Fund grant. They had been hit hard by escalating costs and being really bit going to clients being short. And so what we're seeing across the board, not just the township's experience, but colleagues and similar industries, is a very well buffered estimate. Now, we may understand that, but at the same time, I will tell you that while we did have majority of support at the township board level, it was not unanimous, because, that creates a very high price tag for what you're looking at. And it may not come to fruition. Some people get that, some people don't, and it may materialize. We don't know. We've all seen kind of different things happening in the past, 2 years with projects. So it's not a slam dunk that the board would just say, we'll go for the bigger project. What the heck, it's grant funding. They may not, because they may say,
The future maintenance.
you know, you would just have to see, you know, in the end, the application was approved, as you know, for the warming hut to go to the DNR trust fund. And in the end, it was approved to go to the Spark grant. I just wanted you to be aware of some of the commentary.
Okay.
Yeah, and pricing, especially DNR rec grants, is a bit of a game because it takes 2 years for, not the Spark grant, but for the other passport and trust fund to turn around from the application to when you implement. So you're trying to estimate 2 years out into the future, but not provide such a lofty estimate that it kills the project or that the jurisdictional body says, that's unbelievable, that can't cost that much. Well, it
I think that's what
really
happened.
doesn't. It's a $300,000 project without all the contingencies, but.
Yeah, I think that's also what happened with the warming hut, you know, it was like, we were all kind of flabbergasted with that too, so, yeah.
Remind me, what was that number?
I believe it was 475.
How many people fit in?
So one
Seriously, how many
of,
people would fit in?
oh, it's, gosh, I don't remember the dimensions of it. I can give you the,
But it was
Oh, it
nice.
would be, but you probably could get 20 people.
oh, easily, for
Yeah,
sure.
it was very nice.
For sure. But one of the things too, and this is something you'll be considering with this, is the use of durable materials. What durable materials saves, this is what I look at, and there's one or two things I was like, okay, the maintenance of that. Permeable pavers that you've talked about, they require maintenance. If you do not maintain them, they do not stay permeable pavers. They become pavers, just like concrete. So everything has a maintenance cost, and that needs to be factored in. And that does drive up costs too. So that warming hut had a lot of masonry in it. It had a metal roof. So those things do drive up costs too.
It was nice.
That's a good point, and that'll come up on any DNR application. How are you going to fund and maintain that space?
Currently, what do we have for grounds? I mean, we have somebody year-round, part-time, or?
We do have a full-time person, and then in the summer, we have hired someone for 16 hours a week for about that time of Memorial Day to Labor Day, roughly. However, community garden is not something that they currently maintain now, and we fill their time up generally. And that's where we've talked about with the community garden, you should really look at
And we
the
are.
exterior will be maintained. The lawn will be mowed around it. The snow will be shoveled. Well, no one's gardening in the winter, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying. But not the interior. That should have a governance or maintenance.
And
Plan.
he's not, the maintenance isn't even part of the thought of anything. And just like the permeable pavers, no matter what you have, you're going to have to do some maintenance, maybe 10 years down the road, but to do it on a yearly, you know, again, I don't know if that's the right substrate, but there's got to be some places out there that have, you know, something really creative and good that's going to be what we're looking for price-wise and sustainability, low maintenance.
Well, last number from this from the estimate was, we have about 25,000, sorry, we have about 35,000 in pavers and concrete right now. So this area here, we have priced in permeable pavers. This is where we priced concrete sidewalk, and then this section too. So assuming we've got about 35,000 in cost between permeable pavers and concrete, we could probably get rid of close to 20,000 of that by switching to gravel surfacing.
I mean, that's what I was trying to get at, is where can we,
And you could go back and place permeable pavers in that condition. You just need to excavate down to the.
I mean, if we can eliminate $50,000 to $100,000 in little things and still get the overall concept of phase one, we can always upgrade certain features. It's getting it set up for phase one, A, B, C, two, whatever, A, B, C, we just need to get it started at a reasonable cost, which will allow us to get funding, fundraisers.
The fencing cost is another big one, so half of this fence is trellis fence. It's pricing in more than double the farm fence with wire, so
Might have to do farm fence with wire.
you have to do farm fence for the
All
whole thing,
around it.
And your method of screening would just be growing plants on that farm fence to,
Right.
to accomplish a screen or a buffer.
Yeah.
All right, so so shall we earmarks, figure out a dollar amount we want to earmark to show our support for this, and then trying to think, what else would we need here,
You
to
have,
probably,
you do not have it earmarked, but you do have it recommended to the board to earmark 50,000 to the community garden.
okay, and
And
that's
so
what
you-
they'll be reviewing at budget time?
This won't be reviewed till sometime in the first 6 months of 2023, so I think you could decide, if you want to lower that or increase it or keep it at that level, and then potentially, how you might look at some of the funding options and what you want to look at as far as the concept plan and the phasing. Elise has listed on your December 2022 update for the garden planning team. She says at the bottom of the page, feedback questions on the proposed final design concept, on the estimate, and can the Parks Commission allocate dollars to support the garden implementation? So I guess it would be direction on that amount of the 50,000, whether that's appropriate or adjusted one way or the other. And again, the general idea of the fundraising mechanism and grant applications and the phasing of the plan.
So, I mean, so currently, we have that $50, or 50,000, plan to be reviewed by the Board of Trustees. So we can either increase that, we could sit on it, do nothing, and it'll continue going on. We could always increase that at a later date, later meeting before the trustees review it, correct?
You
I mean,
could,
there's nothing that says we have to make that motion today, but,
When's the next Spark deadline?
so the second phase will be in the, is it in the spring and then the third in the summer, or is it in the summer and then fall?
It's early spring, maybe late
Okay,
spring. Yeah, they're trying to do it all
within a year's time.
once a year. There was talk about the second round coming out in January. But
what? That's
Oh, really?
I think they made that comment when they first released it.
I didn't hear that at the DNR Trust Fund. I heard more that spring, summer timeframe.
More right, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And so my understanding is we could put in for like all of Phase 1 at this next Spark. If they don't like it, we could then cut back, go to 1A in the third round. Is that correct? Or do we not
No,
want?
that counts as two applicants. I would think that
Correct.
counts as two.
Yes, I realize it would count as two, which would mean we were putting all of our apples into funding the
Yeah.
community
Yeah,
garden,
but we-
rather than something.
But then the township would pay nothing, because that's what's nice with the Sparks, is it's paid, there's no matching, so the township.
I understand that.
Would have to match.
You would be potentially losing an opportunity. You maybe you want to guide that level of what you want to go for by the support of the township board as well. That's a possibility.
You mean we're losing an opportunity to go for a Spark grant for a third item?
If you have to go back
Okay.
for that, yeah.
All right. So where we stand now, we want to see if we can, are we wanting to see if we could clean it up a little more to reduce the price for the Board of Trustees, or, I mean, we could leave the 50,000 in place and then, review, increase it or decrease it at a future meeting if we need to, but are we looking, I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do we want to move forward with, the presentation tonight?
I have one more question. When you sent out the survey to the people, did you give them any kind of sketch of what they were thinking? Any description of how would you be interested in a community garden? Can you remind me on that? Because this is not the actual question, this is the results only, correct?
Right, and there was no, because I took the survey myself, and there was no graphic look, because we didn't even have one at that time either.
Right, so-
It was not asked, can you give us, a drawing idea or layout in that? There was just questions.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm wanting to try to get back into the mind of the people who took the survey, and when they said, are you interested in a community garden, what kind of picture would they most likely have in their mind? Because I think that affects what we move forward with.
Well,
anybody
not
understand what
only
I'm
did
saying?
they look at community garden, but if you look at the survey, it does say they're all looking for social
Outside,
life,
yes.
Other than just, and a lot of them were questioning, their own commitment, even with the schools. But again, it was being outside, learning things.
I understand all that, but are they thinking community garden? Are they think they're going to be outside gardening next to their neighbor, not gardening next to a new person in the township? I'm just trying to get more of a sense of what they really were. I mean, they want to learn to grow vegetables. They want to learn how to compost. All these things are very much geared towards gardening. And that is social, that is outside, that is improving health. I mean, all those things that you say your survey says they wanted, but I don't see, from my looking here, that they were looking for, and not that I'm complaining about it, but I'm looking at cost. The rainwater garden, and maybe that's needed for proper maintenance. I don't know that. I just look at it as a huge amount of money that I really wonder if they were saying, would you think our East Bay Township should spend $800,000 on 31 gardening plots and some social gathering areas? Do you think that's a good use of our money or of a good project? Because again, it's not necessarily East Bay Township money if we get a grant. But is that what they were thinking? Or are they thinking, oh yeah, I'd like to have a spot where I could put because I live in an apartment and I could go out and have a nice little area that I could garden, I would socialize, I would learn, I would have fresh vegetables and be healthier.
You think it'd be an idea to maybe try to engage the community again and get their views on the concepts? I mean,
So I could offer.
kind of like a master. I'm thinking of a scenario where we've had to deal with this in the past, and I'm not kind of thinking, and nothing's clicking with me right now. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to offer you two comments. One is that most people, when they have asked or inquired about the community garden, or you say that, oh, the township's looking at a community garden, the comment I hear most frequently is, oh, you mean like at the Commons? So that's kind of, that to me elicits some idea of what people envision. And I will also tell you, if you recall, there was some question at the very beginning of this process. Do we locate the community garden here at the Township Hall, or do we locate it elsewhere on one of our other parcels? The water tower out off of Ike Road. And through the survey, it was decided here, you know, it was like, which do you do first? Do you give people just an opportunity to just garden, and then say, oh, you need some more education, and do an education garden next? Or do you teach at the teaching garden, and then as they're interested and addicted, then you say, hey, we have more space at this other place. So it was one of two approaches, and based on the community survey, the decision was, let's get the education started and the opportunity to have plots, and let's drive the demand for gardening space. So if those at all help
And
you.
that's shown in one of these?
I was just going to mention one other thing.
Okay.
You were saying about re-engaging in a survey. Tim would probably be way better at speaking to this than I would, but we do have the ability to reach out to the people who responded to the survey, and I think Beckett and Rader or Elise would be very skilled in maybe doing a charrette. Could be done in January even, where you gather people who have responded or have interest, and you pose a question like this, and you say, these come with price tags. You know, your probability of
You're already
getting.
hitting the people who are already motivated and excited
You
for
might
it,
say,
so.
here's the.
She already has the
Here's
list.
the initial one that
Yeah.
has, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh, here's the initial one that has phase 1 and phase 2 has the entire amount. This is the price tag. Here's, you know, them separated and still a pretty hardy price tag. Or here's, you know, the more simple. If you had 3 choices and you were spending your money, where would you put them? And I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you guys are skilled at doing this type of design charrettes and eliciting some feedback on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I would maybe, I don't know if I'd call it a charrette just because we don't want to, and I know you didn't intend this, but
Yeah,
we don't want to give people the idea that we're going back to square one.
yeah,
But, yeah, I mean, I think your idea makes all sorts of sense. You could bring this plan that shows the phase 1, phase 2, and we can carve out a phase 1A from this, from the estimate that is really a line item description of all the costs. So we can highlight certain line items on there and say, okay, this is really phase 1A, we don't need to do this, or as we ask the group, do we include this in phase 1 or don't? It'd be pretty easy to go through the estimate and the plan and indicate with writing what could get pulled out of this for phase 1A, and very easy on the estimate to do so.
you,
But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a matter of setting up some boards with some triggered questions to get input.
and maybe it could be a survey. I mean, you know, when you go to restaurant guides and they have $1 sign versus $3 signs, here's the survey questions. Would you choose this one for $3 signs, knowing you're spending this much, and it might have much lower probability of the garden actually occurring? Or would you rather spend $1 sign with a higher probability of it occurring? You know, let them make those choices maybe to help guide you.
We also had a large percentage of 60 and older people who may not be in the area in January or want to come out.
So they could do a survey, but maybe not
yeah.
attend something. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, an open house would be nice because then you get people in person who interact and bring ideas, but an online survey is nice too because then you capture the folks who aren't always comfortable showing up at open houses.
But with that survey too, then that's added cost,
Yeah, yeah.
another survey.
Well, it's something going to an email list, right? The
She
survey?
has email lists, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean-
Those that wanted to share that and stay in touch with it, there's, I think, close to maybe 300 that she has.
That's really good.
Oh, that'd be
I
great.
don't want to minimize the efforts of a survey, but you can do, I mean, Beck and Rader, we use SurveyMonkey all the time. And so you can imagine the amount of effort that goes into creating it. You just have to think of the right questions and then follow the survey and file under SurveyMonkey does.
I think that's what we used, was SurveyMonkey.
Short and simple is kind of the way to go.
I think the biggest work will be what you put into it,
Yeah.
defining, like, say, 3 choices.
Yeah, like an open house would be, an evening of our time and then maybe 3 or 4 hours of parsing out a phase 1A versus a phase 1.
Well, we also have the sledding event too, where we can engage, the community and try to get some input from just, members. So, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts? Should we do that? Should we, try to see if we can, hit that 300 people who responded initially and see if they can give us some additional support or insight on, what they were looking for, and then we can, hopefully review that, probably not January, but February or something, and then we'll also have that sledding event in February, and we can, use that. I think that might be a good starting point, keep the 50,000 in place in support for the community garden. Do a follow-up survey to the respondents, and then review it and, maybe even do an open house, like you were saying, maybe use the February event to talk to some people, and, if we don't get a whole lot of insight from that, we could do an open house fairly easily, or even piggyback it with a master planning open house, because, that's going to have to happen. Well, it has to be discussed at the master planning too. It's going to be part of the master plan, I imagine, so.
Oh, yeah, I thought you meant the planning commission.
Oh, no. I doubt you guys want something more for that, but, if that sounds, good to everybody, why don't we just move forward and plan on doing that?
A bit of extra cost to get the community involved one more time, I think it's worth it, because ultimately we're doing this for them.
Because actually, they spoke what they were thinking, or wanting, or seeing. And now, okay, so we took what you were thinking, wanting, and seeing. Here are 2 sets of, $2 or $6 marks. What's your take on that?
To me, I would give him the direct amount of money. Can we not do that?
Yeah, we can.
Estimate?
I would leave it up to Elise
mean-
and Tim to come
Yeah.
up with the
Yeah.
appropriate questioning.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, on the survey, if you can show for that amount of money, this is what it looked like, and if this other amount, this is what it looks like. So which way do you go? Or however you
Yeah.
want to do it, but I don't know how they would do that. Not unless they went to the website, maybe, or a website to look for the
You should be able to
plans?
provide some
No, you
visual concepts on some kind of survey.
Yeah, totally.
You get A or B, and here's the price tag for.
Yeah.
Are we
A.
willing to take some of that money for this then too? To
And,
do the survey?
and the other benefit with that is we also will have more data to work with. If we did want to do something like a patron city, we could use those results to kind of fill in a lot of the blanks and get that rolling really fast.
We've done something similar before with Arbutus. You always do have to keep in mind, this isn't a scientific survey, so keep it with weigh it with a grain of salt, but you usually get some pretty good information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if everybody's on board with that, I'll just move on to the next agenda item. And thank Tim for, okay.
Are we gonna, because I think most people like you are gonna be worried about how it's paid for.
Well,
I think we need to, first of all, how we come with the 50 grand? Do we think that's enough on a price tag that big? I don't think it is.
well, it's to show, that we're behind the project. We're putting money behind it, and, that 50,000 may complement, an additional 100,000 if we did patron a city. So we raised 50,000, they give us a grant for 50,000, and we earmarked 50,000, and then,
I think the third approach is like a lot of people use that. You're gonna do a third, private fundraising a third, grants a third. People think that seems equitable and rational. And also, do they understand, like, we're not going out for extra, we're not gonna levy more millages for this, like, we're not.
Yeah,
like,
hopefully not.
I think people don't understand exactly how it's paid for, even the very basic, are you gonna tax me more every year for this? Which, no, we're not, you paid what you paid. So do we give them a percentage, like, you pay this much into the Parks Commission every year, this is our total budget, so this really represents, like, in a proportion of the total budget. So of the $10 you paid in taxes, this represents 3 of those dollars. I think having simple things like that, if people struggle with math, would help.
Great idea. And right, just how it's done on the millage. It's only 20 cents more a month.
It really doesn't happen.
If we're taking but if we're getting a grant, then it's not.
Sure, and I would say you
Obviously, we would
propose,
want-
different, like, this is if we had to fund it 100% us.
Okay.
A third, or if we had to completely rely on our community, they're probably gonna shoot it down to.
Okay.
Right, right.
We should, well, I would recommend that we don't just turn it into a shopping exercise where we're asking people to pick the price that they like the best, rather than we ask, what program would you like to see that you also think the community can support financially, 10, 20, 30 years?
You may
Yeah.
even keep the cost separate from the designs,
Yeah.
where you say, are you willing to support something up to 250,000? How do you feel about 250 to 500, 500 to a
Yeah.
million? You know, where is your threshold? And then you may bring it back to, how comfortable are you with this as an initial garden phase, or this or this? So I think between you and Elise, something can be designed that can help give you some information.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
we'll
mean,
make
I
sure.
think that's a good strategy, probably our best shot.
That's why we don't, that's why we didn't put prices
That
on the
people
first
aren't
two
paying
concepts, because people produce it to a
More
shopping
taxes, no.
exercise where oftentimes people really want what they want, and they're willing to wait and raise money for it if they see that as an option.
Yeah, and that was brought up at our community garden meeting, with that whole brain thought with that too, you know. If something's nice, you might want to be able to start storing and figuring out how you're going to back that and have fundraisers and that, because in the end, this is the final, the 800,000 or whatever, without losing the initial thought and the initial whole concept of it. And again, we need to think about how we're wording that word, community garden, because most people, but Beth had a good point, most people are thinking like the commons, that whole area of the commons. And that's sort of my mindset when it was all being created way back in 2014, 15, when we put it into the master plan. So, and you're right, not think of just tomorrow, but 20 years from now, what it's going to be, so.
Okay. Well, I'd like to try to keep things moving along here. I do appreciate your time coming out and doing the presentation with us, and, you know, I hope we didn't come off, you know, being negative or anything, because I truly do like this concept and all that, and I would get behind it. It's just, yeah, I'm just trying to think of some of our constituents, you know, like, you know, I don't want people knocking on my door, so.
No, it's a place that you justify even with explanation, so I.
Thank you.
All right. All righty, and I know, so do we need to include this, like we probably should have a link to the presentation or something in the minutes? Do we do that? Or do we just have a copy on hand if somebody wanted to review it?
A copy of the proposal
Well,
of his PowerPoint.
and the survey and stuff like
If
that.
anybody is watching and they want a copy of that PowerPoint,
just
Tim is
request it.
sending it, so we're absolutely forward it to them.
Do we need to approve spending money for another survey?
I think you can already do that through the, I think it's really going to be rather limited. The surveys are, as we said, pretty easy to put together through SurveyMonkey. I think it'll just be some time from the consultants, some hourly rate from the consultants and putting the questions together.
So does this board need to approve that?
I think you're fine, because they're already working for you towards the design of the
I just want to make sure,
of the
Right.
garden.
okay.
All right. We'll move to the next subject, our 2023 calendar. And I believe, but you're probably looking for a resolution of accepting a calendar for moving forward. So this is what we have presented to us. Does anybody have any?
I think to make things easy is, these circled ones are all like the holidays. So
Yeah.
Beth had said also in the email, if we wanted to, we could still hold our meetings on our normal Monday nights, regardless if it's Martin Luther King or that kind of,
You
correct?
just will, it does impact if you have staffing here, whether it's a consultant or, if they have the day off, they may not be available for the meeting that night. But other than that, the meeting room is here and can be done, and I'm not sure with Leah as
Oh,
well.
Sure.
Do we, like, if I remember right, did we meet with the other boards and kind of coordinated schedules last year too, or?
No, I think every board does their own resolution. And if I recall last year, I think you guys just did, when you came into a conflict with the holiday, you just did the Tuesday following it.
That is correct.
Okay.
And when that was in conflict, I think only once did we have to go to the south side because something else was in here.
That was a special meeting,
Yeah,
and it was
okay.
a topic, that we
Yeah.
had to get done that evening.
So really, the first 2 months are going to be shifted over if we went that way too, which is fine. I'm okay with that.
So are we looking, has everybody looked then if we moved it to the Tuesday following?
It would be,
I don't want to make anyone work on a day they don't have to.
yeah.
Right,
So January 17th, the 21st of February, and then
June 20th.
June 20th. 3 days, just shift it
yeah, I think
the
that's
day
a
after
good,
the holiday.
I think that's.
And in all
good.
fairness, we don't have June, we haven't declared June 19th. We haven't matched up, synced our calendar yet with the federal holidays. So we are here, but I can't tell you about Beckett and Reed or Leah. So you're probably safer in just doing that too.
I agree.
Okay. So we'll continue with the third Monday, except when it falls on a holiday, it'll go to the first
Following.
Tuesday following. And then keeping our 6 o'clock time, everybody okay with that? Works pretty good for me. Okay. So if everybody's on board with that, we could do do the resolution, a motion to approve a resolution.
Make a motion to approve the 2023 calendar and meeting time schedule at 6 PM for 2023.
Support,
And this would be to coincide with the resolution of Parks 2022-02. All right, so I got a motion by Commissioner Andres and a second by Commissioner LaRose, all in,
Could you
well,
do a-
roll call.
Yeah, thank you for the resolution.
okay, Andres,
Yes.
Layton, absent. Garland,
Yes.
LaRose, yes, Walsh,
Yes.
Reardon.
All right, motion passes. All right, and then, are you going to need me to sign something by the end of the night, or what's easier?
I'll probably just have you, I'll probably just drop it at the desk, the front desk. When you're on your way home one day, just stop and sign
Okay.
it.
Same with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll leave it at Val's old desk. so,
Okay.
Yeah.
I put that in my,
We almost Val, we still call it Val's old desk.
I like that.
All right, and then our last,
When will that be ready though, Beth? This week, next week?
Probably tomorrow. I'll email you once it's
Okay.
ready so you don't make a trip without it being there.
Sorry, I was just looking at item 11, upcoming meeting dates, December 19th. Was that just,
Oh, sorry.
Election
That just
law.
wasn't updated from the last meeting, so that will be
Sorry.
the January 17th.
okay.
Yeah, I got confused.
I was gonna say-
That was what we just did.
We're handling business really fast, all right. All right, so the last item that we have tonight is the election of officers. So at the end of the year, we elect officers, moving into 2023, and yeah, so we have a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary.
Chair, vice chair, yep.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Chair and vice chair. Sorry, it's different in county. So, in this point of the meeting, we'll take on nominations for anybody who would like to nominate a chair. And I'll do so with nominating Commissioner Andres to be chair. Anybody in support?
How do you feel about that?
I'm good with it.
I support it.
Okay. Just real quick, and I'm not trying to ditch out on being chair or anything. I'm happy to be involved as much as possible. I just felt like it'd be a good idea to give someone else an opportunity to, so. So I have a nomination to elect Commissioner Andres as chair. Motion by Walsh, second by LaRose. Sorry, I'm trying to follow the script and hoping I'm not
That's
messing
okay.
it too
You
much.
You have a
Okay.
nomination, and then you just ask for other nominations.
Is there any other nominations
For chair.
for the office of chair? And am I able to do that with a motion already, though?
I would just, that was
It's re-
really a nomination. It really wasn't
Okay.
a motion, so to speak. It was you nominated Andres, and now you're just asking for other nominations. And then if there are some, then you'll just do
Okay.
them, you'll do the motions in order.
Okay. Is there any other nominations for chair? All right. So I'll make the motion to elect Commissioner Andres to chair. And I'll need your support with that again. So motion by Walsh, support by Commissioner LaRose. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Looks like you will be the new chair for 2023. Now moving down to vice chair. Anybody interested in being vice chair, or
I
anybody?
nominate Ryan because you can easily step in and take over. Oh, am I supposed to do that editing? Probably not.
You can do that.
Oh, good.
Sounds good to me.
You can nominate someone, and you can nominate yourself as well, too, so.
Oh, okay. So I can second?
Change your mind?
Like I said, I'm happy to help out. I just, I felt it was a good thing to kind of share the role and let somebody else have an opportunity. And, honestly, I think, with my family situation going on, it might actually be a good idea to have somebody in that position in case I do have to miss a few more meetings. So, I think we'll be in very good hands, and I would accept the nomination of vice chair. And so I can second it if I wanted.
If she would like to make the motion as well to elect him.
Well, don't we need to ask, are there any other
Yes,
nominations?
you're exactly
So
right.
was-
Thank you.
Sarah,
You are on top of it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make a nomination for vice chair? And that to include, any members who might be missing tonight, are we allowed to nominate?
Usually on the boards I'm on, if they don't show up, we give them work.
Okay.
So
All right.
I make a motion for Ryan to be our vice chair.
Support.
All right. Motion by Garland, support by LaRose. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next one will be the position of treasurer. Currently, Commissioner Layton has been our treasurer, and I'm kind of getting the idea that she's kind of wanting a break from treasurer. It's just kind of what I'm kind of, okay. So I don't know,
I would like to make a recommendation
okay?
for treasurer to be our new elect, Garrison Reardon. And is there any others?
I'll support that nomination.
Is there any others that would like other to?
All right, so we just need a motion. Really don't
Go ahead.
I make a motion to, for treasurer for Garrison Reardon.
Support.
All right, motion by LaRose, support by Commissioner Garland to elect Commissioner Reardon as treasurer.
Did that too.
Sorry, it's only a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you're the new treasurer for 2023. And the last is secretary. Currently, Commissioner LaRose is holding that position. Are you enjoying that position? Because
Immensely.
I would happily recommend you to continue as secretary.
I would second that.
Any other nominations? All right, so I'll make a motion to,
Nobody left.
Well, yeah, there's Stephanie.
we can appoint.
That's kind of hard.
So I'll make a motion to elect Commissioner LaRose to the position of secretary. Anybody want to support
Oh, I'll
my
support
motion?
it. Sorry.
All right, so motion by Walsh, second by Garland, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And you will be our treasurer, or secretary for 2023. Thank you for holding that position down for us. With that said, we have all our officers for 2023. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to try to help out the best I can, and I'm sure Beth will too. But other than that, we don't have a public anymore, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion. We adjourn this meeting at 8:18.
Did you say 19? All right.
Oh, on the 19th.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll second that. Motion by Garland, second by Walsh to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, drive safe.
Are we turned off?